Greetings. My name is Andrea MacDonald. I'm the Associate Director of the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center, and welcome to the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center's Roundtable. These roundtables are an opportunity for us to talk with ministry leaders, pastors, and scholars around the pressing challenges and opportunities that we face as church leaders. Today, we'll be discussing Gen Z, and I'm joined by two ministry leaders currently serving students in Christian higher education. Reverend Dr. Angulus Wilson is the chaplain here at Wheaton College, having served at both Samford and Fresno Pacific. Passionate for equipping students for ministry, Chaplain Wilson has dedicated his life to discipling students to share the good news of Jesus with the world. I'm also joined by Dr. Andrea Summers. She's an ordained minister in the Wesleyan Church and is currently the Dean of Spiritual Formation and campus pastor at Indiana Wesleyan. Andrea has a huge heart for helping college students and is passionate about creating space for them to be shaped into the image of Christ and for the sake of others. Both of them are close personal friends of mine. I'm very excited to be joined by both of you here as we're discussing, first and foremost, how to equip or how to reach Gen Z. What are the spiritual motivators, questions, and opportunities facing young adults? So when we talk about every generation presents a unique mission field. They have their own questions, their own concerns, their own urgency. And first and foremost, I wanted to ask both of you, throughout your years of serving and reaching young adults, what has helped you to understand these unique needs for Gen Z? Angulus, let's go to you first. What's the unique character of Gen Z as a mission field?
Wow, that's a great question. I almost wish you would have went with Andrea first.
Oh, you take it away, my friend.
So we could get the real answer. I think for me, it's finding out their passions. This is what I've learned, especially primarily here at Wheaton. I don't try to presuppose I know what a student is motivated about or what are their passions or their causes. So if you have an ear to listen, they'll reveal to you what it is they're passionate about and how they may see themselves serving. And then that's when I think I come alongside to try to encourage ways in which to best stimulate that passion and then equip them with resources to accomplish the task.
When we talk about passion then, Andrea, what do you find is the kind of the spiritual passions of young people, or even just passions as a whole, even outside of kind of the traditional spiritual realm? What do you find are the passions of Gen Z?
Well, they're very varied. I think that, this Gen Z is less homogenous than maybe, any other generation before it. So it's really hard. We'll be talking in broad sweeps in a conversation like this because we're talking about a whole generation, but it's really hard to make any kind of like crystal clear things. But although, studies do show us that they are more spiritual and open to spiritual things than other generations. I think that the kind of questions that they're asking, like the language I've landed around this lately has been, I think a question that Gen Z asks when it comes to God and spirituality is like, is God moral? Whereas maybe, generations before would want to say, is God true? Is God right? And, it had more to do with like right belief. I think that partly because of the moral elasticity that you see in this generation, they really want to know, is God good? Is he moral? Can I trust this God? And there are probably some specific issues, and it's different for different individual people, but there are some probably issues that really rise to the surface that become kind of litmus tests a little bit for this generation when they're trying to answer those questions. So
That's a good answer.
You mentioned openness and trust. What is it that's driving that desire? Is it the moral elasticity of kind of an older generation that they're seeing not behave ethically, not behave morally? Or is it something that's broader culturally? What's driving that openness specifically around moral, like the moral questions?
Well, I want you to speak to this too. Yeah. I think it's all the above. It's interesting. It's an interesting paradox because while there is this interest in, that question, is God moral, is God good, there's also at the very same time a significant skepticism of authority, skepticism of God, of organized religion, you know? And so it's almost like those two things are almost running parallel and feeding off of each other. And there's some difficulties with that, but I think there's also some opportunities that come along with that too. I don't know. What would you say?
I love that. I would just add something to that. I think there are Gen Z believers and Gen Z unbelievers. The unbelievers still have this same drive for moral justice. And that's why we see such a big push for social justice, the marching, the demonstrating. We want change and we want it now. And we want you to be moral, even though they're unbelievers. I think on the other side of the coin, the Gen Z believers have both a push and a desire for justice, but to see Christ really lived out according to the Scriptures. Is the Jesus of the Scriptures who we're really following and serving. I see that on our Wheaton campus much so than anywhere else.
Now, both of you, I know from just conversations that you've had enormous impact in reaching some of these students and really seeing them move from unbeliever to believer. And so what have you done? And if there's this openness around morality, how have you as leaders bridged that gap? How have you seen that openness as opportunity rather than obstacle?
Go for it.
I think
now you're being modest. See, that's the problem.
Angulus is right in that there is this kind of commitment to justice and to kind of equitable playing fields, that sort of thing. But what's also running alongside, it's just there's so many tensions pulling in opposite directions. Running alongside of that too, though, is kind of this what I kind of term like a you do you-ism, you know? So you do you and I'll do me. And so it's interesting that you can have such a penchant for justice alongside this real kind of, hey, everybody do what's right in, pull from the book of Judges, like everyone is doing what's right in their own eyes, kind of a mentality. And so how do you, and that's really like where the gospel comes in, I think, is because there is this idea of counting the cost. Man, I think that this generation is required to count the cost of what it means to take up your cross and follow Jesus in a way that subsequent generations, for a while anyway, have not had to do. And so the call into Christian community, the call to the gospel is a call to die to self in a really different way, to die to culture around us in a really different way too. Maybe also just, throwing another thought in there is like, whereas, culture, Western culture anyway, has been living around this individualism for and that has had its impact on the church. It's had its impact on our understanding of Christian community. I think Gen Z is moving towards a kind of tribalism, and that sits outside of the church, right? But like this. They're not so much looking to find their own way and their own. They want to ascribe to it an identity. They want to have an identity, but their identity needs to be connected to a community. Like I'm who I am because I'm identifying myself with this community or this group of people, or it's a tribalism more than it's just kind of like a raw individualism. And so that maybe is an opportunity for the church, right?
Do you connect that to a little bit? And we've talked about this before, the idea of kind of a transcendent, like individualism, but also a drive towards transcendence. I know at Wheaton we have students, like there's always conversations, are students moving towards Anglicanism or some of the more high church elements of Protestantism and even beyond into Catholicism. That drive for transcendence, that drive for my place within something that's broader than that. Do you see that in your own, in the Wesleyan Church and here at Wheaton?
I mean, absolutely. We have talked some about this, and I think. But again, I can't. To me, it's not like, well, the majority of Gen Z believers are moving towards Anglicanism. It is so, again, it's not a homogenous group of people. But I think they are moving towards an expression of faith that is bigger than just my own personal, they're connecting with a group of people and an expression of faith that's bigger than just them. And so for some of them, that is an interest in kind of the ancient church. And so for some of them, that's an interest in the works of the Spirit, So, what would you add?
I would say they're looking for something totally new, totally different from what they've experienced. And when they've come here to get away from home, They want a new form of something that's rawer almost and pulling them into something they've never encountered. What I've learned here is that they don't so much want me to lead them as they want me to come along with them. It's that Elisha model teaching the school of the prophets. Will you come go with us as we build this new edifice down by the Jordan River? And so they want YWAM-ish type of ministry. They want it real, they want it uncut, and they want their chaplain to come along with them to experience it. And they want truth. And I'm seeing in Gen Z kind of almost this decline from the old traditional way of doing church. And I think that's why we're seeing a decline in many of our structures on Sunday morning. They want something different. It's Friday night, it's Saturday night, it's Monday night, it's worship through the week, and they want to be engaged with a cause.
They want to rather than episodic, it's standard, habitual every single time. They want it interwoven with their life throughout the week.
Oh, yeah.
We talk about smartphones, we talk about technology, how that interweaves with our life. There's no less that the idea that church would do that as well.
That's right.
But before we end, last question. You both are chaplains or spiritual formation dean at Wesleyan. Students come to your office. Parents are dropping their kids off at school. They have spiritual questions. They're going to wind up at either of your offices with their question. What are the questions that they come to your office and ask? What are the theological, ethical questions that they sit down, sometimes even through tears, saying, "This is the reason why I'm struggling"? What's the common question? I know you guys get thousands of them. What is the driving question that you're asked the most?
Great.
Parents or students? Because it's
That's
two
true.
different sets of questions. You go first.
No, you.
Okay. Well, gosh. Yeah, I think it goes back just to kind of maybe come full circle. A lot of them come back to that question, can I trust God? Is God good? And, these young adults have experienced more brokenness in their 18, 19 years of life than I think generations ahead of them. It's interesting, we did a series on the book of Revelation in chapel in the fall, and students were in it.
Wow.
They were so excited. Number one, because they never hear about the book of Revelation in their local churches. It's difficult to preach on.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
But secondly, because in the book of Revelation, you see the spiritual realm and you see everything come together like this. It's all together. And that is not something that you have to convince these students, is that the spiritual realm is a reality in our everyday life today. Even students who are far from God, they have had spiritual encounters of all kinds.
Yes.
And so they were leaning in. So I think it's those kinds of questions, like, help me understand the spiritual experience that I had and I don't know what to do with it. Help me understand the faith that I've inherited that feels like it doesn't feel like it's holding together. And questions around human sexuality and what do I do with a God who says this and the world around me says another thing.
Yeah, I would just add to those questions that you just mentioned, also circling back, those justice questions. When you're seeing things like young men killed in the street by police, and where's my Christianity now? How am I to think about this when mom and dad say something different at the table, but that's not what I'm experiencing in my roommate at college? And so they're having these different conversations, and now they're hurting or they're broken because, wait a minute, could my pastor who loves me at home been wrong? Could my mom or dad been wrong? Chaplain, what do I do? How do I put these together? So great suggestions.
And don't worry, we never tell the kids that mom and dad are wrong, ever.
No,
yeah.
That's right. That's right.
But I do think it's a unique space that you guys are both in terms of, for some of these students, it'll be the first time in their life that they can actually ask these questions in a space where they can get honest and godly biblical feedback of how to live this life. And every generation needs to rethink that question about how to navigate, how does my faith interact with this point that's in tension. This is a spot where you can actually do that. And those questions are going to be different, whether or not it's justice or whether or not it's identity, sexuality, whether or not it's just issues of trust. Those questions are going to be asked every single generation.
And don't forget the romance questions.
And
The freshman,
plenty of those.
The freshman
Yes.
love.
Plenty of those.
I'm going to marry as a sophomore. All those.
Yeah.
hey, it wouldn't be Wheaton if it wasn't Ring by Spring.
That's right.
So,
I will say just that, no one's paying me to say this, but it reminds me just hearing you talk, Andrew, like it feels to me like Christian higher ed is more important in our world today than maybe ever. It is so these formative years when these young adults are making decisions about who they are, about their identity, about what they believe, about is God good? Is God moral? Who am I going to marry? What's my calling? What's my vocation? How's my vocation fit in to all these questions? And it just feels like these questions are not just your run-of-the-mill coming of age questions these days. These are questions that are hooks that students hang their faith on for the rest of their life. And I just am so grateful, and I mean, I know you guys are too, to be able to be in those moments with these students who are making these kinds of decisions. So
Yeah, it's such an honor.
such a gift.
It's such an honor and a
It's
gift.
incredible.
And just that the Lord trusts you with it. And then you have those aha moments in chapel or in worship when God, as he just comes down himself and meets them in that space, and you watch them totally transformed. Powerful.
Well, thank you so much for talking through the subject about reaching and equipping Gen Z. We're excited to have both of you here to talk with us today. Thanks so much for joining us on the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center Roundtable.